You're at the bottom of the barrel and worthless. Today, you're fired. Using a novice who attended a reputable university is preferable to you." Mr. Sawyer had an arrogant smile. After hearing it, I was unable to contain my feelings any longer. Comprehensive. "I'm grateful for everything you've done so far." I said my goodbyes and walked out of the office. This was the pivotal moment that resulted in Mr. Sawyer's demise and my move towards starting over. I am Brian. I'm a 40-something regular office worker. I joined a local business and worked as a sales representative for a maker of precision equipment parts after receiving my degree from a nearby university. I put in a lot of work since I was a novice, and as a result, my performance is at the highest level. Everything in my life, job and family, is going well. My gracious wife is encouraging me to work hard. She helped me advance to manager status before any of my contemporaries. My supervisor, Mr. Foster, was the one who brought me up in this manner. However, Mr. Foster is already in his 60s, and I went to bid him my final farewell after learning that he would be retiring this year. I'm really appreciative of everything. Mr. Foster, it will be lonely without you. Brian, you'll be in charge of sales going forward. Try your hardest. I'm cheering you on. Yes, I will do my best. Mr. Foster gave me a shoulder pat and gave me a seemingly encouraging smile. Brian, a new manager is on the way. I'm confident you'll succeed. Your subordinates have a great deal of faith in you. Mr. Foster, I'll try to live up to your expectations. Kindly ease up going forward. Thank you. Seeing Mr. Foster, who served as a father figure to many at work, depart from the organization was quite upsetting. However, I swore deep down to manage my staff the way Mr. Foster managed his. The next week brought the arrival of the new management. Since he was from the headquarters, he was unfamiliar with this area. However, we were anticipating a wonderful individual because he was in the elite league and had graduated from a prominent university. It's good to meet you, Mr. Sawyer. Here as a manager, I'm Brian. I'm excited to collaborate with you. Which university did you graduate from, Brian? I graduated from Towson University here. When Mr. Sawyer heard my response, he grinned. I've never heard of it. You're claiming to be a graduate of some obscure subpar university. I guess you should do your hardest. Mr. Sawyer's patronizing demeanor internally infuriated me, but since I enjoy my work, I chose not to dwell on it too much. The advent of a manager with significant corporate work experience worried me, but as long as I carried on with my regular tasks, I assumed everything would be all right. But my expectations were shortly dashed. Mr. Sawyer, who was unfamiliar with this area, started calling our current client connections cozy relationships and radically changed our dealings with them. Furthermore, adhering to this is how we did it at the headquarters. He gave us absurd assignments based on his own notions. Mr. Sawyer, the previous method was much easier for that task. Hey, don't be so naughty. Since I am the department head, please don't oppose me. I didn't mean to disagree with you. I believed I was offering wise counsel, but it appears Mr. Sawyer was merely enraged. Mr. Sawyer gave me a shrewd look. Are you trying to deceive me because I'm not familiar with this region? I wasn't thinking that at all, but Mr. Sawyer, your method is inefficient. How could you use that tone when speaking to your superior? This explains why individuals from subpar universities. Observing our conversation, my coworkers became alarmed. Mr. Sawyer was always this manner, not only with me, but also with the other staff members. Mr. Sawyer would often respond to our opinions by saying, "This is an order from the manager. Don't be a subordinate and oppose me." The environment within the company became toxic as a result of Mr. Sawyer's inability to listen to anyone. When my subordinates and I went out for drinks one day, they said to me, "Brian, isn't Mr. Sawyer getting out of hand? He doesn't pay attention to our thoughts about work and is altering our practices on his own." Yes, working has been a little challenging. Our procedures are unquestionably simpler and more effective, and the needless overtime is becoming intolerable. Sighing, all I could do was listen to my subordinate's grievances. I've mentioned it a few times myself, but he doesn't listen at all. That's the main idea. Brian, Mr. Sawyer treats you quite harshly. He always brings up prior educational experiences. If someone works with you for a while, they can see that you're competent at what you do. All I could do was try to encourage them, and I patted my subordinate on the shoulder. Well, maybe Mr. Sawyer will understand in time. Let's keep up the good work until then. Yes, I like this job, but recently I've started dreading coming to the office. Well, let's keep the sales going among us. Though I said this to my subordinates, the atmosphere in the sales department had indeed been bad recently. I wanted to do something about it, but I couldn't go against Mr. Sawyer, and he probably wouldn't listen to me anyway. Honestly, I was also feeling stressed by Mr. Sawyer's attitude. I was working hard, but Mr. Sawyer judged me solely on my academic background, leaving me wondering what to do. A few months passed in this manner when one day I inadvertently stepped in as I saw Mr. Sawyer berating a subcontractor more harshly than usual. Mr. Sawyer, that might be a bit too harsh, don't you think? What? What is this? Third-rate university, incompetent babbling about university backgrounds are irrelevant now. The subcontractor is an important partner to our company. It's troubling if they are treated too harshly. Shut up. What right does someone from the bottom like you have to act so high and mighty? Mr. Sawyer glared at me hatefully and sneered unpleasantly. That's right. We don't need someone like you. An incompetent bottom dweller like you is fired. It's better to use a new hire who graduated from a prestigious university. I thought I had gotten used to Mr. Sawyer's nonsensical remarks, but his words this time made no sense to me. What do you mean? Haven't you heard, incompetent? There's a new person joining the sales department tomorrow. He's an elite, graduated from a prestigious university. Is that so? It's clear that someone from a prestigious university is more competent. I've decided to make the newcomer the manager instead of you, starting tomorrow. I was utterly shocked by Mr. Sawyer's statement. I looked at Mr. Sawyer doubtfully, wondering if he was serious, but he was grinning smugly. It would be tough for the newcomer to suddenly become a manager. I've decided I'll speak to the HR department. As the department head, by tomorrow, you'll probably be fired. It'll be refreshing to be rid of an incompetent bottom dweller employee. I couldn't take it anymore after being told that. Understood. Thank you for everything up until now. After saying my goodbyes, I left the workplace. A few subordinates chased after me, trying to hold me back, but I only responded with, "I'm sorry I couldn't be of more help. I leave the rest to you," and then I completely left the company. My subordinates might have thought of me as cold for leaving so abruptly, but I decided that nothing good would come from Mr. Sawyer and me as the manager continuing to clash. Moreover, the rumors about the newcomer from a prestigious university being truly competent had reached me. If such an outstanding person was coming to support the sales department, I decided to leave the company with my regrets in check. Upon leaving the company, I immediately called my father. "Hello, Dad. I got fired from the company." "Oh, is that so? You've worked hard until now." Since Mr. Sawyer's arrival, I had been telling my father that I might quit my job. When I called to tell him, surprisingly, my father immediately told me to come to his company. So, right after resigning, I headed to the company run by my father. When I say my father's company, it's actually now my brother who has taken over as president, and my father has stepped down to the chairman position. Initially, after my graduation, I was suggested to work in sales at my father's company, but wanting to experience the rough waves of society first, I chose to work at a local company for some social experience. My father, who had listened to my whims, offered to re-employ me at his company. In fact, I had been approached a little while ago about joining my father's company. Though I had always talked about work with enthusiasm, my expression had darkened, and I had become reticent in the past few months, which my father had completely seen through. "Hey, something must have changed at your workplace recently." "How did you know?" "I can tell just by looking at you. You used to go to your job as if you were kicking up the company, but now you don't talk about it at all." "Was it that obvious?" "Actually, the new manager who arrived is an unbelievable person." While glossing over the specifics of the work, I shared what Mr. Sawyer had said, and my father was even angrier than I was. "You should quit a company like that any time. Our company always has a place for you. It's not that simple. I have subordinates who look up to me, but I appreciate the offer. Could you give me some time to think about it?" Having had that conversation before, it's probably why my father immediately said he would re-employ me. In the end, the same day I left the company, I went to my family's company and was immediately placed in sales. Just as my father had said, my brother offered me a managerial position, but I felt it was too much to ask for. I'm a newcomer to this company, so I'll join as a regular employee. In fact, my father's company is a major precision equipment manufacturer. That is, it was a major client of the company where I used to work as a salesperson who used to work for a parts factory that was a supplier. I vowed to work for my father's company, making the most of my knowledge. I thought about how I could repay my father and brother for everything they had done for me. The next day, I immediately went on a round of greetings to suppliers and clients with my new boss, Ryan. Among them was, of course, the company I had worked for until the day before. Knowing the situation, Ryan offered to skip it considering my feelings, but I insisted it was fine and headed straight to my former company. As expected, my subordinates were quite surprised to see me as a new contact person from the client side. A subordinate who was close to me misunderstood and tearfully said, "Brian, you've come back. That's great." However, all I could respond was, "Sorry, but from today, I'm an employee of the client company." This subordinate was disappointed, hoping I would come back. But then Mr. Sawyer appeared. Mr. Sawyer, with his usual unpleasant look, glanced at me, and without even checking the name of the company I had re-employed at, he disparaged, "A bottom feeder like you could only get a job at some low-level company." Really, what kind of person is he? As I was pondering this, a man approached Mr. Sawyer. Such disrespect towards a client is questionable. It's fine. This guy is, James, the incompetent bottom feeder I fired yesterday." Mr. Sawyer replied. The man, referred to as James, looked worriedly at Mr. Sawyer, frowning. "I think that's irrelevant now. Whatever his status was until yesterday, he's here as a client today." "Maybe so, but we don't need to deal with a company that employs such incompetence. Send him away quickly," Mr. Sawyer insisted. It seemed that James was the new manager who had taken over my position, the elite from the prestigious university that Mr. Sawyer had mentioned. Unlike Mr. Sawyer, this person appeared polite and certainly intelligent. Hearing this exchange, I felt relieved, but Ryan, appalled, spoke up. "We came here today to introduce Brian, the new Kodak person." "But isn't this disrespectful?" "I know him, so no need for introductions. Besides, we won't be dealing with your company." "In that case, shall we consider our business dealings with your company terminated?" "I don't want to associate with a company that hires incompetents," Mr. Sawyer stated coldly. After stating this, Mr. Sawyer waved me off rudely. "Come on, get out. I have no intention of dealing with someone like you." "Are you sure about terminating our dealings?" I asked. "Can't you hear? Incompetents are useless all around. Get out quickly, or I'll call security." With that, there was nothing more to do. Ryan and I returned and reported the incident to my brother, the president, and my father, the chairman. My father, with a troubled expression, said, "We've had a long relationship with that company, but maybe it's time to end it," and started writing something. The rest of the story was relayed to me later by a subordinate I was close to. A few days later, President Watson personally summoned Mr. Sawyer. "Mr. Sawyer, you've done something unthinkable." "I have no idea what you're talking about," Mr. Sawyer replied, looking troubled. "You turned away a new Kodak person who came to greet us the other day, didn't you?" "Oh yes, that guy. But there's no need to worry about it. That person had just left the company and was truly incompetent at his job. I didn't ask for that. Turning away a Kodak person is not the way to treat a client. But it's fine not to deal with a company that employs such a person," Mr. Sawyer retorted nonchalantly. However, President Watson, with a stern expression, presented a letter. "Did you check which company Brian came from? He's from our largest client, a major precision equipment manufacturer." Upon hearing this, Mr. Sawyer turned pale and began to tremble. "No, that can't be. Brian is competent. He got rehired by such a renowned company. That can't be. That's not possible." Mr. Sawyer, trembling, started reading the letter President Watson was holding. As he understood the content, his face turned pale, and he began to shake. The letter stated that there would be a permanent halt in dealings with the major client, and Mr. Sawyer was the reason for it. "Why? I didn't do anything." "Read it carefully. It's written that you turned away Brian and unilaterally declared a halt in dealings from your side." "What?" "Of course, my father was the one who sent that document, and I was the one who provided the information. Deals with my father's company accounted for 30% of my former company's total dealings. Therefore, not being able to deal with us would be a significant loss. Based on this, I had James conduct interviews with the subordinates. It seems you've been giving unreasonable orders and verbal abuse for some time." "No, I never. Maybe I got a bit too passionate in my guidance and went too far. I've heard that it was because of this that Brian was forced to leave," President Watson said, glaring at Mr. Sawyer. Desperately making excuses, Mr. Sawyer stammered, "That's not true. That incompetent Brian is trying to set me up. It's not just Brian. Other subordinates have also reported verbal abuse and terrible behavior from you." President Watson presented evidence, causing Mr. Sawyer to collapse to his knees. Watching Mr. Sawyer, President Watson declared calmly, "Mr. Sawyer, as of today, you will relinquish your position as department head." Upon hearing this, Mr. Sawyer covered his face with both hands and started shaking, crying. Later, President Watson visited my father's company to ask if they would consider resuming business with them. "I apologize for the great rudeness and inconvenience caused by Mr. Sawyer. I will take responsibility for his guidance. If his behavior does not improve, we will consider taking disciplinary action. It's a presumptuous request, but could we possibly resume our business dealings?" I had no grudge against President Watson. On the contrary, I was grateful for the employment until recently. After discussing with my father, we decided to resume the business dealings. Hearing this, President Watson grasped my hand and expressed his gratitude. Half a year later, a former subordinate invited me for a meal and shared what happened afterward. "Brian, it was quite a mess after that." The subordinate seemed eager to tell me. Following the incident, Mr. Sawyer's erratic guidance and abusive behavior came to light, but the company's regulations did not lead to his dismissal. Instead, Mr. Sawyer was demoted to a regular employee, and his salary was significantly reduced. He was given a completely different job, spending all day organizing files in the storeroom. I thought this was lenient enough, but it seems Mr. Sawyer couldn't accept any punishment. Angry about having to do boring work alone in a room after previously commanding many subordinates, he resigned on his own. However, after learning about the circumstances of his resignation, his wife, dismayed by his selfish behavior, left him, and they divorced. He had a son, but the son also left with his mother, leaving Mr. Sawyer all alone. After sharing this, the subordinate's face brightened. With Mr. Sawyer gone and James joining us, working in sales has become much easier. James, my successor, became the manager after Mr. Sawyer's resignation. He even came to the drinking party today and greeted me, saying, "Thanks to you organizing the team so well, I've been able to manage somehow, even though I'm new to this position. I truly appreciate it." Not at all. I had heard rumors about your competence before. I'm really grateful to you. It seems James wanted to express his gratitude to me directly. Despite the fact that both Mr. Sawyer and James are elites, James stands out for being both compassionate and competent. It truly made me happy that he assessed my work rather than making assumptions about me based on my university. That was the instant I knew all of my efforts had been worthwhile. James and I became friends after we had dinner and talked. James, who was ready to give his all at work, asked me a number of questions after receiving a surprise promotion to sales manager. I was quite delighted to see James's commitment. The sales department became more positive once Mr. Sawyer left, and sales output increased dramatically. I was reminded by this experience of how much leadership and the environment of the workplace affect productivity. I felt inspired to put in a lot of effort in my new job. Afterwards, I found out that President Watson had not intended for Mr. Sawyer to step down. In fact, plans were in place for Mr. Sawyer to go back to his previous job if he had expressed regret and worked hard for roughly 3 months. "There's no such thing as a boring job," he said, hoping that he would revert to his earlier level of sincerity. Sadly, it appears Mr. Sawyer missed the fact that this was President Watson's last act of compassion. Mr. Sawyer left the company without appreciating his work and without knowing President Watson's goals. Mr. Sawyer tried to get a new job, but it was hard for him to get employed because of his age. It appears he was unable to put up with being treated like a novice, even when he managed to find another place to work. He was fired for having a poor attitude and being haughty towards supervisors who were younger than him. He carried on changing jobs, and he is currently making ends meet with regular employment. I've been using my prior experiences ever then in my new sales career. I've learned from this experience, so in addition to concentrating on raising my own game, I'm also trying to improve the department's general atmosphere. I work very hard to train the juniors, and as a result, my coworkers and subordinates in the new company think highly of me. James really helped me realize this, and for that, I am really grateful. In addition to continuing to value the experiences I received from my former employer and clients, my goal is to help my family's business expand. I'm resolved to put in a lot of effort to earn back my father's and brother's patience and trust.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. "Probably Sam." Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. "Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized." Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. "All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason." "What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do." "I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you." "Please." Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, "Yes. That's Nick for you." Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, "I'm very sorry." Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, "Get his boss here immediately." It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. "What is that idiot doing?" "All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next." Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. "If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you." I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using therein. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hope to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.